Statement from Coach Franklin. Just a reminder, turn your cell phones to vibrate, off, or mute, and then we'll go to Rich Scarcella.
Like always, appreciate you guys coming out and covering Penn State football and Penn State athletics. Obviously just over there at the send-off for the basketball team, which is awesome. Been a big week for Penn State athletics. You got men's basketball and wrestling competing in the NCAA postseason. But there's really a ton of other teams within the athletic department that have had great years as well. Track and field, women's gymnastics, women's hockey, softball, men's hockey, men's volleyball, men's lacrosse, women's lacrosse, fencing. I can go on, and I hate to do this because if I don't mention somebody, then someone's going to be upset. But there's so many examples of the entire athletic department and university thriving right now under Dr. Ben Naputi and Pat Kraft's leadership. So that's been great. You know, we talk about, kind of what we're trying to get accomplished this spring. Talking to Coach Yursich, which our spring objectives: improving the run game, increase our mental and physical toughness, improve our execution and communication, improve ball security, improve our explosiveness in the run and pass game. And then we got to identify leaders and empower them in the leadership positions. Defensively with Manny, reestablish our physical, mental, and emotional toughness, create habits to play with relentless effort, master leverage and tackling systems, create havoc with all of the havoc plays, tackles for loss, sacks, PBUs, forced fumbles, and interceptions, develop fundamentals and technique, identify leaders and empower them, and then obviously figure out, really in all three phases, but figure out who our 11 best players are, and then how do we create as much depth as we possibly can behind them. And then on special teams, continue to develop fundamentals and techniques for our special teams units, develop and identify top special teams personnel, our 2 deep, again, for all units, identify leaders and empower them in leadership positions, and then cultivate special teams really kind of throughout our entire organization. Obviously excited to watch the 11 new high school early enrollees, and then also the 4 transfers that are on campus. Excited to see what they're going to be able to do and how many of those guys will end up factoring in. Some of those we'll figure out right away. We'll see that they're going to have a chance. Other guys will go through the spring kind of feeling things out, and then obviously we'll have a chance to truly compete in summer camp. Some hires that obviously you guys are aware of, but Marcus Hagens, I've been really impressed and pleased with how he's been able to come in and really not only build relationships with our players, but their trust, and same with our staff. Obviously you saw the announcement of Dion Barnes yesterday, which went over extremely well. That literally was decided yesterday. Dion found out yesterday, our team found out yesterday, so that's not like old videotape that you guys are just getting. Calvin Lowry, another Letterman's been awesome, and then I'm not sure if you guys are aware of this or not, but Torrance Brown is now back with us as a graduate assistant, replacing Dion's position. So it's great to have Torrance back. Torrance was part of our initial recruiting class, was a defensive end for us. So really good having him back. And then really kind of the last note is, just cool to have, I think we have 10 Lettermen now in the building, and obviously a ton of alumni as well, which I talked about at the board meeting. In a lot of different roles, so I think that's been a real positive for us. So excited about the spring. Today will be our first day to get out there and be flying around and get some work done and get some evaluations. It feels like spring ball weather out there, so that's good too. And look forward to answering your guys' questions.
Start with Rich Scarcella, Ready Eagle, and then we'll go to Mark Wogenrich.
Good afternoon, James. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. About Dion, it seems by the response from your staff, the players last night, it was a very popular decision. What do you believe are his strengths, and why did it take so long to pick him as the new defensive lineman?
Yeah, again, I think first of all, it depends on your lens, right? Long. Some people go a long time. We're usually able to move quickly. But the length of it, I was hoping to be able to get done before spring break. I always want to be able to tell the players first. That's hard to do in today's business. We've done a pretty good job of the players hearing it before it's leaked on the media. That's something that's very important to me. I think they deserve the right to hear first. So once we had not made the decision before spring break, then I didn't feel like there was a rush to do it, because my plan was to do it in person when we got back, either Sunday or Monday. But the other thing is, we ended up interviewing a ton of people for it. People that we had relationships with, people that we didn't have relationships with. To be very honest with you, sometimes we go through the interview process for guys that we definitely are gonna consider hiring. And sometimes we're interviewing guys to get a feel for, to see if they're a possible candidate in the future down the road. So kind of a wide variety, NFL guys, college guys. And the other thing is, a little bit like that was in that video, is although Dion is a letterman, and although the players and former players felt strongly about me hiring Dion, ultimately I had to hire the right person. And if that ended up being Dion, then great. It's a win on a lot of different levels. But I needed to make sure of that. And throughout that process, it just became more and more obvious that this was the right thing to do. So did I answer both your questions? Okay. We got you muted now, so whether I did or not.
What are his strengths, do you believe?
Yeah, I think obviously, Dion's got his collegiate experience here at Penn State. And one of the things that I probably wasn't as aware of, he's done a really good job of taking everything in and being very intentional about it. I take time to meet with the GAs and analysts and give them my perspective on things that they should be doing. That's going to be important for their development. It's going to be important for the interview process. It's interesting, we kind of went back and talked about, I remember, I used to have interviews, I remember with Joe Brady, either coming in early or staying late and doing kind of interview process with those guys and giving them feedback. We had a ton of guys that we did that with. And Dion was actually doing a really good job of everything we talked about, taking very serious and being intentional and adding things to kind of his game. I think also kind of his background, he's played for really good D-line coaches. He's coached for very good D-line coaches. His time with Brent Pry, I think, was valuable. His time with Manny Diaz was valuable. And then I think the other thing that kind of goes into this as well is his time of being a trainer. When Dion was coaching in high school, he was training a lot of the high-profile defensive linemen in that region, whether they were from Philadelphia or New Jersey. And when I talk about high-profile, I'm talking about guys in the NFL. He was training all those guys. And I think what I've watched with him over the last couple of years is he's made the transition from being a trainer to being a coach. And there are aspects and similarities of those two jobs that are similar, but there's a lot of other aspects that go into it as well. I also think his ability to relate to the players and recruits is also going to be a strength of his. He has the ability to be hard and demanding on them in a way that they respect and can relate to, which a lot of times younger coaches, they have a hard time with that. So I think, obviously his ability to relate to the coaches, his understanding and fundamentals and techniques of the position. And then one of the things I was impressed with during the interview process is his understanding of the big picture, not only defensively, schematically, but then also in terms of all the other things, in terms of managing the room, in terms of setting standards and expectations of the room, in terms of academics and his role on being the head coach in his position. I think the fact that he's literally a paper away from finishing his master's degree, I think that sends a message. I'm not saying a master's degree in college coaching is a must, but I do think it sends the right message and it illustrates the right message. So, there's a lot of things that we feel really good about Dion. And then I think, whenever you can promote from within, which is what I would typically prefer to do across the board, he understands our culture already. He understands the defensive scheme. So when you go out and hire maybe a more experienced coach from the outside, you get that, but then that guy's got to spend time learning the defense and understanding the culture. So you can make arguments both ways. But I was very impressed with Dion and how he interviewed. The last thing I'll say, I know this is a long answer, but I think the other thing that really jumped out to me that I thought he did a good job in the interview process is you felt, not only did you hear it, but you felt his passion for coaching D-line, you felt his passion for Penn State, and you felt his passion for this specific group of defensive linemen that he has a relationship with. So, it was kind of all of that. It was all of that.
Mark Wogenrich, all Penn State, and then Frank Bodani.
Hi James, how are you doing?
Hey, Will, how are you, buddy?
Good, thanks. Regarding the quarterbacks this spring, how do you plan to cycle their reps among Drew, Bo, and Jackson? How is that going to be different without a returning starter back?
You guys want to talk about the boot and the scooter? You guys don't want to talk about that? That was like hot news. And then 2 days later, he's not in it anymore, and I don't get any more questions about it. But from a rotation standpoint, obviously we'd like to keep it as even as possible, and we kind of have it structured that way at practice, specifically with Bo and Drew. Try to keep it as even from a rep standpoint as possible. But right now we really have it structured in a way based on our depth right now that all three of them will get the same number of reps. I think that's really important in spring ball, that not just at the quarterback position, but at all the positions, that everybody's getting an opportunity to compete and develop, just like we try to do at the beginning of training camp. And then obviously at some point we got to transition and get ready for the first game. So the plan is to split the reps evenly, and then obviously as we start to get a little bit of bumps and bruises and have to adjust to practice. And it may be, I think a few years ago, you guys remember we were short with offensive linemen. Well, I talked to you guys about it's not just offensive linemen, it stunts the development at other positions as well. So right now it's starting out even, reps across the board for all three of them. And then, obviously specific to Bo and Drew, really making sure that we protect those two guys' reps as much as we possibly can. There could be some situations where Bo actually gets more reps by the end of spring because I think there's some things that we may want to do with Bo to take advantage of his skill set and maybe create an opportunity for him to get some more experience. Not only during spring ball, but in games next year as well. So we'll see how that all plays out.
Frank Bodani, York Daily Record, then Mike Gross.
Hey, good afternoon, James.
Hey, Frank.
Good to talk to you.
Good to talk to you.
Yeah, your defensive line.
Frank, you're very close to the camera.
I know.
You don't have to back up. You're a handsome guy. You can pull it off.
Older than you, okay, but still handsome.
Are you older than me?
Yeah, a little bit. 53. Gonna be 54.
You look much better than me.
Thank you for this. You always throw me off my questions.
Yeah, whenever I do this with you guys are uncomfortable. You guys are physically uncomfortable when I
It's
ask
like
you guys
Thanksgiving
questions.
all over again.
Oh, exactly. That was me and you?
Oh, yeah. All right. Okay, so let me think. Okay, defensive line.
What's coming up, Easter? No?
Yeah, it is kind of coming.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'll leave you alone.
Okay, thanks. Your defensive line, defensive tackle, what could you talk about your depth there, what you expect this spring from those guys, how Dion's relationship can help immediately, especially with the line, especially with the guys inside. Some people wonder about your depth there going forward.
Yeah, I think we feel good about the depth that we have there. Obviously, you'd like more, but when you talk about, we got 4 guys that have played a decent amount of football, 3 specifically that have played a decent amount of football with Beeman, Durant, Elise, and Vandenberg. Those guys have all played. And then we got 2 guys that we're excited about with Artis and Townley. And then, Siafa's a guy that's just transitioned over there, so see what he's going to be able to do as well. And then we got Ty Blanding coming in the summer, so we'll see how that plays out. You never really kind of depend or expect a true freshman to be able to play there, but you never know. Zane Durant was able to do it last year, so we'll see how that plays out. But Beeman, Elise, Durant, Vandenberg, those guys. And then we have some guys, obviously, as you guys know, Izzard has played a ton of football. I'm not sure how much he'll be able to go this spring with some bumps and bruises that you guys will find out about, obviously, when you come out to practice. But when you factor him in, then you really got 5 guys that have played a ton of football at Penn State. And to me, if we can have a 2.5 deep at every position with guys that have played in games and showed that we can win with, then great. I would like us to be a little bit bigger at D-tackle. I think there's some games where we're able to get away with it because of our athleticism and our quickness. But to win the way we want to win, we need both. We need size and quickness and athleticism. I think Dion's going to be able to build off of what we've done the last couple of years, but I also think he's going to put his stamp on it as well. I know one of the things that's really important to him is effort. And I think, that sounds like a simple thing, but we think there's a little bit left in the tank to get our guys to play on a different level, when it comes to effort. I'm a big believer on both sides of the ball. You guys have heard me talk about this before, is the game starts up front, whether it's the defense or whether it's the offense. To your point, I think we got a chance to be really talented at defensive end. I think we got a chance to be really good at defensive tackle, but there's probably a little bit more question marks there and a little less depth. I also could see us maybe getting into some situations where in passing downs we're getting more of those defensive ends on the field if they show that they're able to rush as in internal players as well. So I know Dion wants to put his stamp on it. I think we'll have a better idea for that after spring of what we did well, what we need to build on. But I think at the end of the day, it all starts with relationships. He's got really strong relationships, but I also think the players need to understand, and I know Dion addressed this with him yesterday, this is not going to be the same Dion. As much as he thinks he's going to be, and as much as they think he's going to be, when you're in a complementary role compared to, running the show and running the room, there's a transition that happens. And it's going to be fun and it's going to be exciting, and I also think we all got to play a part in that as well in supporting Dion in that room through this transition. That would be for whoever we hire.
Mike Gross, Lincoln Student Newspapers, and Donnie Collins.
Good afternoon, James.
Hey, Mike. Good, man. How are you?
Great, thanks. Based on what you said a couple minutes ago about the quarterbacks, it sounded like maybe you're considering the possibility of playing Bo, and I realize it's March, and I understand that,
but you're going to ask anyway.
Yeah, that's correct. Playing both of them and maybe using Bo as a change of pace, using his running ability. Is that, am I reaching, or is that sort of obvious? Is that what you're thinking in terms of experimenting with, let's say?
Well, this spring is just to get those guys as many reps as we possibly can, to be able to evaluate them, to create a competition, and to also create depth. I do think if you look at last year, we had a very specific plan to get Drew as many reps as we possibly could, to build that depth and to build that experience. So if we needed him, he was ready, but also to help us, this year moving forward. This year's a little bit different because we're back to kind of having a true competition again. And then not only the true competition, to somewhat answer your question, Bo has got some athletic traits that are desirable and maybe make sense for us to use if they give us the best chance to win. But before practices even started, it's hard to say that. So we'll see how it plays out. I know you want me to give you the game plan for West Virginia today, but I understand where you're coming from with the question. But I do think there's a little bit different dynamic based on, I would say, Sean and Drew's skill sets were probably more similar. They were different, but they were probably more similar, where I think maybe the differences between Drew and Bo may be a little bit more dramatic in terms of their skill sets.
Johnny Collins, Scranton Times Tribune, then we'll come here in the room.
Hi, James.
How you doing?
Doing well. I know you got two guys coming in after spring, but depth at running back behind your top two guys, Nick and Katron. How much do you hope to develop there, depth-wise, in the spring, and do you think you have potential for them?
Yeah, we'll get those guys a ton of reps, not just to develop depth, but also just to be smart with the other two, right? It's for a number of reasons, and then that's the exact reason why we ended up signing two running backs. It ended up being two high school running backs, but that was the whole idea of signing two, because whether the third back comes from who we currently have in the program, or whether the third back comes from an incoming freshman, that's what we got to figure out between this spring and then summer camp as well, for depth, but also to make sure that we're not overworking those two guys either.
Mark?
Hey James, we know a lot about your two veteran tight ends. I was wondering, what are you kind of expecting out of Dinkins and Cross, because we didn't see a whole lot of him last year. And in Mega, we look at him weighing in at 269 on the roster. Is he going to be a tight end throughout his career, or is that a guy that you may be looking at somewhere else at some point?
Yeah, so we were very transparent with Mega from the beginning. We had conversations about position flexibility, whether it was D-line, whether it was tight end, whether it was O-line, and he was open to that, as long as he was going to be given the opportunity to come in and compete at tight end. So with us, all of our guys, we have open conversations with them during the recruiting process about how we see them. I think you saw it a little bit with Driver last year. So we'll see how it plays out. The thing I have heard from the players is he's got really good hands, and he moves well, out on the field. Talking to the strength coaches and watching him in winter workouts, and then again talking to the guys. So he could be one of those kind of exceptions where he's just a massive, tight end, maybe more of a true Y. We'll see how that plays out. But he is big. He did have an injury early on when he first got here, which I actually also think limited some of his training and development in terms of putting on muscle. So I think he's going to continue to grow. But you never know. He could be, the exception. We saw a couple of those guys at the combine that are 280-pound tight ends. You never know. We'll see how that plays out.
Dinkins and Cross, yeah.
Dinkins and Cross. Dinkins is the guy who's obviously been in the program now, and I think understands the expectations and the standards, and has got a lot of skills to work with, and has shown some really good flashes last year. Theo and Tyler Warren got some bumps and bruises, and in some ways it's a blessing in disguise because Dinkins, Cross, and Joey and Mega are going to get a ton of reps this spring. So I think it's really valuable because in some ways we know who Theo and Tyler are. Dinkins has really shown some flashes. This spring will be really important for him to take that next step and just be more consistent. And then, Cross was a guy that got an injury early on in the summer last year, and it limited, his opportunity to be able to compete. But he really handled things well. He's worked his tail off. So those guys will get a ton of reps. Really all four of those guys will get a ton of reps. Dinkins, Cross, Joey, and Mega. So we'll see how that whole thing plays out. But we're excited to watch them. I think we kind of know, obviously, what we have with Theo and Tyler, but it's going to be really good to figure out kind of where we are with this other group. Are any of those guys ready to truly compete with Tyler and Theo? Or is it truly a competition to figure out who's going to be the third tight end next year, which I think you guys know is a big part of our offense and what we do. One of the things I do really like about this group is we got a chance to have more depth, where last year, if we had an injury or two at tight end, we had to really get away from some of our packages. I think these guys are going to allow us to have the depth that we're not really worried about losing a package based on not having enough, proven, versatile tight ends.
Elle?
Hey James, how are you?
Sorry.
No problem. Is 15 practices a lot, not a lot? How do you attack this from how much can you get out of spring practice, and how much can a player rise on the depth chart through 15 practices?
Yeah, I think a guy can make a significant move in spring ball. Very rarely will it be kind of the deciding factor for next fall, because what I love about spring ball, it gives the player and the coaches a really good indication of where they are and what their strengths and weaknesses are. And then I think you guys know I'll have my end of the year meetings with all of them, and I'll sit down with each player on the team and give them specific feedback. So now they can say, okay, from spring ball, here's my strengths, here's my weaknesses. These are the things I need to work on all summer leading into training camp. So I got a better chance to help the team. I got a better chance to compete. So I think there's a ton of value with it. I think 15 practices to me is kind of the sweet spot. We try to mirror spring ball with training camp. So, although it's probably much better from an installation standpoint because you're able to go meeting one day, practice the next, and stagger it that way, where at training camp it's every day. So I think from a learning perspective, it's probably more valuable. But then my point is really our 15 installs in spring ball will be very similar to our first 15 practices in summer camp. So it's almost like, okay, now they've been through it once, now they get it the second time during summer camp. The other thing I think will be helpful is it's early to say this, but based on our numbers right now, we anticipate going back to a traditional spring game like we've had in the past. I know a lot of people have gone away from that. I think there's value in it. I also think that we're one of the unusual schools where when 75,000 people show up to watch a spring game, I'd like to be able to give them a spring game. And I'm not even sure the number, Portman's a big number guy, like tailgating. Like I have no idea how many are out there. But we're one of the unique places. We're gonna have more people at our spring game than most people have for a regular game in the fall. So whenever we can create a spring game atmosphere, we wanna do that for the fans, but I also think there's value. There's value for me in seeing the guys play under the lights, technically, I guess, not technically I should say, but under the lights and in front of the fans and with the media there and everybody's eyes on them and watching, because some guys rise to that occasion and some guys, feel, the pressure and the anxiety from that. So figuring that out there's value in that. But then there's also some value in my coaching staff too. I like to break the coaching staff up. I like to give opportunities for other guys on the offensive and defensive side of the ball to call a game. So when you're able to break it up into ones versus twos, I don't typically have Manny and Mike calling the offense for both sides. I'll give other guys opportunities to do that as well, and I think that's a really good professional development opportunity too. So I think spring ball is really valuable, especially the way we try to do it.
Hey James, how you doing?
Good, man. How are you?
I'm good. I have two for you on your offensive line. The plan right now going into spring to replace Juice. Who are you looking at? I would imagine Hunter is in that discussion. And also, you didn't really have the left side of your offensive line for the stretch run. Olu and Landon were both hurt. Can you kind of give us an update, kind of where they are, maybe going into spring?
Yeah, good question. So Olu will be full go. Landon Tangwell, I think, will be full go by practice 3. We got a number of guys. They'll come out the first 2 practices and do kind of more individuals and jog throughs. Individuals full speed, and then depending on how they do with those, then they'll have an opportunity by practice 3 to, the medical staff will determine, do we need to keep modifying them or are they in a good place? So it'll be great to have those 2 guys back. Obviously proven guys have played a ton of football for us. And then at center, yeah, I think, Hunter, I think, is going to be in a competition with Dawkins. I think there's some other guys. I think Benga will take some center reps. I think Wormley, could take some center reps as well. And then Ruley and Harvey will be there as well. So it allows us to have, on paper, a 4 deep from practice perspective, which I think would be really valuable for those guys. But, part of it is Hunter will also be one of those guys that starts out slightly modified for the first 2 practices to see how it goes. But it'll be a competition with Norzad and Dawkins and some of those other guys that we have listed as guards, but we'll also get them some center reps as well. And then Ruley's a guy that's done some really nice things that the staff's been impressed with. So we'll see kind of the step he's taken since the season ended.
Yeah.
Hey James, where do you feel, right here in the back, how do you feel the expectations are going into this spring versus last spring? Considering you had the rough end to 2021 and now you're coming off of the Rose Bowl win.
Yeah, those things really don't factor for us internally. I think obviously externally, I don't kind of try to concern myself with the external opinions or expectations and those types of things. We're approaching it the same way we've always approached it, where we got to get better. And I think one of the things I talked about with the staff this morning is we have to remember, although this is a competitive environment, it's about Penn State getting better. It's not about the offense winning, the defense winning. It's, now don't get me wrong, once we get to competition, let's get after it. But my point is, there shouldn't be any surprises, right? Like, Manny should know what the offense is installing so he can have his players prepared for it. Mike should have a very good understanding of what Manny and the defense are installing, so there's no surprises. Now, once everybody knows and you can have your players prepared for what they may see at practice every single day, now it's competition, but we're not trying to trick each other, in practice. It's, okay, this is what we're installing on offense. This is what we're installing on defense, and you need to be aware of that and how that impacts our offense. So if it's a heavy install on defense, do you want to have a heavy install on offense because it magnifies kind of the looks that the guys are going to see? So that's kind of the fine balance. I'm a big believer that that's important for the head coach to do, is to manage that, because when you're trying to teach and lay a foundation, you really don't want to be getting exotic looks early on in training camp or early on in spring ball. I've been through that myself as a coordinator. I don't think that's the right way to teach. And you know, that's kind of the value from it. So our idea is to get better this spring, really at every single position, individually, collectively, by positions, collectively by side of the ball, and then collectively as a team and as a staff. You know, and then obviously we'll take all that information and go into the spring, and you guys will be talking about the end of spring and, you know, basically what you saw and what you liked in the spring game and what you saw and you liked from the 7 minutes of practice that we let you come watch. You know, and then obviously everybody will be writing, you know, articles, and all those magazines will come out in the summer that I'll be sitting on the beach reading and seeing if I think they're accurate or not. And then, you know, we'll open against West Virginia at home, which will be a huge game and a huge opportunity for us that we're excited about. But right now we're just trying to get better, you know, as our program and our units.
So,
Hey James, how comfortable are you right now with the state of the wide receiver position on the team and the guys that you currently have? And ideally, would that rotation look like last year, where you have your 3 guys who tap out when they need to come out, or would you rather rotate more organically?
Yeah, I think in general, you'd love to have 3 guys that have separated themselves from the pack, and they are in until they're tapping. Now there may be a situation where there's a 4th guy that won't allow himself to be separated, and then to me, I've always felt like it's really important. Say you have 2 positions, I constantly talk to the coaches about this. Say you have 2 defensive ends. I really think it's important that if you have them ranked 1, 2, 3, and 4, your 4 needs to be behind your number 1, because that 2 needs the 3 right behind him trying to take his job every single day. Typically, your 1 should be an established guy that's going to work no matter what. Obviously, you hope there's tight competition at every position, but my point is that 2 be behind that 3 is really important. So we'd love to be in a position where we have a 2 deep where there's not a significant drop off, but you could also make the argument, if there's not a significant drop off, then your 1s aren't who you want them to be or need them to be. That room, we think there's the talent in that room to go where we want to go. I think we have to be tougher, and we have to be more consistent. And if you look at college football and if you look at the NFL, probably the area where you can change games the fastest in college football and the NFL right now is that wide receiver. It's, you know, I think it's something that we all, from a common sense perspective, have always understood. There's just more space out there. You know, so if you get somebody out there that can either run past everybody or catch a short ball and make people miss and go 80, that changes the game. It also changes the defense. So it's interesting, you know, it may impact the running game as much as anything. Because if people are concerned that you have a guy that they don't feel like they can leave in a one-on-one situation, now you're having to have a safety over the top all the time, then obviously that's going to create opportunities in the running game as well. So I think the potential is there. We got to go earn it, and we got to go show it. And like I've taught you guys in the past, I think the biggest word for me is consistency. And that's not at wide receiver, that's at every position. You know, pretty much everybody in that room is there for a reason. They have the ability to do it. They've shown flashes. It's about consistency.
T. Frank, and then we'll finish with Audrey.
Hey James, over on your far left.
What's up?
How you doing?
You were back there earlier, weren't you?
Yeah, I hopped the fence though.
Appreciate it.
I wanted to ask you your philosophy about getting bigger at defensive tackle, because you're working with players that you have on the roster currently. Some of those guys dropped weight, most of them stayed relatively the same size. So I guess from a big picture perspective, are you willing to sacrifice athleticism in order to get that size?
No.
And secondarily, you mentioned effort. You want some more effort out of your defensive tackles. Does that extend beyond plays on the field to stuff outside in this area? And generally, what's your philosophy on how to get bigger?
So no, we are never going to chase size for size sake. That's where Leanne, our nutritionist, and that's where Chuck Losey, the strength coach, all of our weights are based on body composition. So if you got a guy who's naturally a high body fat guy, we're not going to ask him to put on weight because he's most likely naturally just going to put on more body fat. And we have a range really for every position based on not only our college experience, but also if you look at the NFL draft, what those numbers are. So we got a pretty good range of, are you in an acceptable range where you should be? And if you're on the low end, then you should be able to carry more weight. And we obviously always want it to be lean mass. If you're carrying lean mass, it should actually make you more athletic. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to gain weight and reduce body fat at the same time, which is easier said than done. That's also why we're really putting the emphasis on doing it in the off season, because we don't want to be messing with it during the season. And that's where if you can gain a pound every week or a pound every 2 weeks or every 3 weeks and just gradually put it on the right way throughout the season, that's what we want. But no, it's not chasing size for the sake of size. If you talk about like a baseball player, I think they say like a 5-tool player, is that what they say in baseball? Is that accurate? Like it's the same thing like in football, right? Strength is a tool. Speed is a tool. Quickness is a tool. Length is a tool. When you talk about football, the game of football, right, is about creating space on offense and taking space away on defense. And you can do that through speed to cover areas of the field. You can do that with length to cover areas of the field, and hopefully a combination of both, of speed and length. Size, when we're talking about weight, is also a weapon. But you'd like to try to be able to have just enough of each of those variables to have the impact you want. But it's one of your tools. You know, your football IQ, your intelligence, how quickly you process information. There are all these tools and traits that we're looking for. And size is a weapon. You know, it is a weapon. I think you guys look at Venga. You're gonna look at Venga, and I think you guys see us. We have him listed at like 359 or 69 pounds right now. You're gonna see him. If there is such a thing, he's the best 369 pounds you've ever seen in your life. He's just a big human being, and carries it extremely well. That's a weapon for him. You know, let me preface this, then I'll shut up. I'm a huge Aaron Donald fan. Aaron Donald has hurt college football and defensive tackles, in my opinion, because every single one of these kids think they're Aaron Donald. Like, well, I'm gonna lose weight and be more athletic. Well, there's been one Aaron Donald in 50 years. At his size, to be as disruptive as he is, and as strong and as quick and as explosive. The problem is, everybody thinks they're the exception. And the reality is, there's been a lot more 300-pound defensive tackles that have had great NFL and college careers than there's been the 275, 85-pound D tackles. Don't get me wrong. If Aaron Donald wants to come to Penn State, we want him. But our guys need to understand that's the exception, not the norm. And we got to find kind of the happy medium between the two, if that makes sense. But everybody thinks they're Aaron Donald now. That guy, you know, I don't know about you guys, there hasn't been many of them in the history of the game.
Finish off with Audrey.
About the boot and scooter. No, just joking. Complete joke. Wanted to ask you about your right tackle.
Good one.
You didn't bite. I thought you might. I wanted to ask about your right tackles and specifically Drew Shelton. Is he somebody that you want to try on that right side? Because obviously you guys didn't have him last spring.
Yeah, so back to kind of what I was talking about before. Yeah, Drew will be at right tackle, competing with Caden Wallace. We're going to try to figure out if we can, create a competition to figure out who is that fourth tackle or second left tackle, however you want to look at it. Or are we going to be in a situation where whoever the third tackle is the backup at both right and left tackle, or is he the third tackle and then somebody moves over? That's what we're trying to figure out. Obviously, you'd love to be in a situation where you feel like you got 4 tackles that you can play with and win at this level, or it's like last year where we felt like, Drew Shelton was that next guy. This spring and summer camp, Drew will be competing for a starting job, and that's what we have to figure out. Is there a fourth tackle on the roster? What I hope is there's 5, kind of like we talked about. I'd like to have a 2.5 deep at every position. But if there's not, there needs to be at least a third guy that we think we can win with a fourth guy who's developing, if that makes sense. So right now, Drew will be at right tackle, competing, but there'll also be, obviously opportunities for him and others to get some work at left tackle too.
Thank you, Coach. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Coach.